Today's story is basically like what it would have looked like if Dr. Seuss wrote it instead of Stephen King.
Every night is just like Halloween as you rock and roll this graveyard scene.
Graveyard rock.
It's 1973 in the seaside town of Sandown on the Isle of Wight. Dark Side of the Moon just came out. Women are allowed into the London Stock Exchange for the first time in history. And near the golf course in Sandown, 2 children are exploring a strange sound they heard from the swamp. Now, these kids are identified as a 7-year-old girl named Faye and a boy of a similar age who goes unnamed in the original Boooooo report. By the way, that's the British UFO Research Association, who published a full report on this incident in 1978 in the Boooooo Journal, okay? And in that report, they don't name the boy. So we're gonna call him Georgie because, duh. So the 2 kids were hearing a sound that they said sounded like an ambulance siren, but there wasn't any road nearby. There was just this weird little swampy area between the Sandown airport and the golf course. So Faye and Georgie followed this weird wailing sound that they were hearing to a wooden footbridge, where they saw a clown in the woods. Now, this was before Gacy and Pennywise made clowns nightmare fuel, right? And it was way before the summer of 2016 when fidget spinners, ankle boots, and seeing clowns out in the woods were red fucking hot, okay? So I guess to these kids, seeing a clown in the woods wasn't immediately horrifying, so they stuck around and watched as this clown emerged from under the footbridge. Blue glove first, okay? Very cartoonish. I'm picturing like the blue glove like reaching out and then it like comes out after. Very spooky, okay? So they said that this clown was wearing blue gloves, a green tunic, and a yellow hat with wooden antenna. And they said that as they watched, this thing was fumbling around with this kind of book-shaped object in this like kind of slapstick way. It like fumbles it and drops it into the water and then it's like splashing around looking for it. So after this physical comedy bit, it finds the book that it dropped in the water, okay? And he picks it up and he goes into this like metallic structure that was nearby that they said kind of looked like the metallic structures that would be used on building sites, except that it had no windows. And they said that this guy had a funny kind of walk, which they described as very cartoonish. So this thing goes into this metal hut, okay, comes out with a microphone attached to a white cord that's attached to what might be the book thing that it was fumbling with earlier. Wow.
Hi.
I
love you.
I love you. So this thing pulls out this microphone attached to this maybe the book thing. We think it might be the book thing that it had been like splashing around for, okay? And then this wailing sound starts again. And at this point, little Georgie is out, okay? So he starts running away. And Faye, like, you know, doesn't want to be left behind, so she follows him. But then as they get farther away, the wailing stops and the 2 kids hear a voice as if it's like right beside them. And it says, "Hello. Are you still there?" Now at this point, I don't know what you would do, but I gotta be honest, I think I'd probably do what Faye and Georgie did. I think that the curiosity that I would feel about what I had just seen would outweigh like any fear that I had in this situation. I would have to go back. And that's exactly what they did. And this time, as they got closer to the clown and his weird metal hut, they realized like he was even more bizarre than they first thought. They said that he was 7 feet tall, okay? And he had no neck. It was just like thunk, his head right on top of his shoulders. And he had on what they called a yellow pointed hat that connected to his tunic. Kind of sounds like a hood. Like a hood to me. This hat had a black knob attached to the top and wooden antenna coming out of the sides. So he has this yellow hat, a green tunic, and a yellow collar, all right? A little bit of color coordination there. He's got his blue gloves, 3 fingers on each hand, kind of like Mickey Mouse-esque, and 3 toes on each feet. He's wearing white pants, and apparently he has these like wooden slats on his sleeves and around his ankles that kind of sound like they might have been decorative to me. Like if you look at the Boooooo illustration, I don't know what kind of function these could have served. They kind of really just look decorative. They look like little ruffs to me. And his clothes were all kind of battered. Like my boy had been through some shit, okay? His threads were ripped up. And they said that his skin was white with a very papery consistency. And that underneath this weird hood hat thing, his head was disproportionately large and round, and it almost looked like his face had been painted on. It had triangles for eyes, a brown square for a nose, and just a thin yellow line for the lips. It had 2 round circles on the cheeks, like little blush marks. Cute. And then it had this like stringy red hair that was coming out from under the hood and fell across its forehead. So the kids walk up to this thing and it takes out a notebook. And on the page, he writes a couple words, but they're kind of scattered all around the page and they're not like in any intelligible, complete sentence. But then this thing starts to point to the words in a specific order. And they realize that by pointing to these words, he is saying a sentence. Just he wrote it all out of order. And the sentence that he's saying is... So they start asking this thing some questions, okay? And they ask him about his ripped up clothes, and he says that those are the only clothes that he has. And they ask if Sam's a man, and he laughs and says no. For the record, I don't think that this question was about gender, but whether he was part of mankind, like as a species. The kids were asking if he's human, because the next question that they ask is, are you a ghost? To which Sam replied, so they asked like, well, what are you then? To which Sam just enigmatically replied, and even though he had introduced himself as Sam, he told the children that he had no name. And he drew a sketch of another like him for the kids, saying that it was someone that he was looking for, which implied that he was not alone there, and that there were others that were like him that might be around. He also told the children that the humans frightened him, which, same buddy. But he also said that if he were attacked by humans, that he would not fight back. Which of course he wouldn't. He's a sweet, clumsy clown baby crying into a microphone in the woods. He's not here to fight anybody. So then Sam invites the kids into his metal abode, and they enter through like a little flap. And inside the metallic hut, he takes off like his hood hat thing. And the kids said that underneath he had big white ears, and his head was balding with like little patches of reddish brown hair. And the kids described the inside of the metal shack as having 2 levels. The ground floor had blue-green wallpaper, and the walls were covered in all of these weird dials. And then there was an electric heater and simple wooden furniture. And they said the second floor was narrow, like almost like an attic, with low headroom and a metallic floor. Sam also said that he had a camp on the mainland, but he didn't say where. And the kids asked about Sam's diet, and he said that he drank water from the river, which he was able to clean through some kind of process. He also told the kids that he only ate berries, which he demonstrated in a very unusual manner. First, he put a berry in his ear, and then he tilted his head so that the berry would roll through his ear and pop out his eye, and then it would roll, and then he would like flick his head and it would roll down into his mouth. Very weird. Very cartoonish, once again. Before suggests that Sam might have been wearing some kind of like protective mask, and that he was able to analyze whether the berry was poisonous or not by like rolling it through this mask, but I don't know. I just feel like it was a party trick that he was doing for the kids, like entertainment. Faye and Georgie chatted with All Color Sam for at least a half hour more, though the before report doesn't really detail the rest of their conversation. But they found the interaction so unsettling that as soon as they left the clown in his weird metal hut in the woods, they ran to the golf course and told the first grown-up they saw that they had seen a ghost. Unfortunately, this grown-up was not of a curious mind. I mean, he was not down to clown, okay? And he just laughed and dismissed their claim completely. You're telling me that a dude who's into golf has no imagination? No way. I'm sorry, I don't mean to yuck your yum. If golf is your thing, baby. I just never met a golf aficionado that I feel like I'd like to have a conversation with, okay? In my experience, the Venn diagram of like people who are into golf and people who would go check out a freaky space alien in the woods, 2 separate circles, no overlap. So unfortunately, this interaction put the kids off from telling any other adults about what they'd seen, but it didn't introduce any doubt in their minds about what they'd experienced. They were certain that the interaction that they'd had with this being in the woods had been real, though what exactly he was, they weren't sure. They wondered if he had truly been some kind of ghost, or maybe just some guy dressed up, which, if you ask me, I'd way rather it be a ghost. A dude cosplaying his OC alone in the woods and like doing slapstick comedy routines, way fucking scarier than any ghost or interdimensional being could possibly be. Anyway, Faye was so unsettled by the whole thing that after 3 weeks of trying to keep it to herself, she finally told her father what she'd seen. The Boooooo report calls Faye's father Mr. Y. Faye is an alias as well, by the way. It says that Mr. Y was so alarmed by what his daughter told him, he immediately asked her, if it might have been made up. But Faye was so convincing, and she told him that no, it wasn't made up, that she'd really seen something out there in the woods, and that in fact she hadn't been the only one to witness it. So Mr. Y immediately went into investigation mode, and he went to speak to Georgie. And he questioned Georgie to see if the details that he would provide would match up with the ones that his daughter had given him. Unfortunately, Mr. Y said that he found Georgie very difficult to communicate with, so he couldn't get the full story out of him. But he was able to confirm that Georgie had seen Sam too. Of course, Mr. Y went to the area in the swamp where the kids claimed to have seen this strange being, but there was no evidence of Sam or his strange metal hut there. This didn't surprise Mr. Y, who didn't expect to find anything. After all, Faye had already told him that the children had been the only ones who were able to see Sam. She mentioned that there were some workmen who were repairing a post not far from where this metal hut was, and that when Sam started wailing through the microphone, the workmen did not seem to react to it at all. And it was as if they couldn't hear it or see this creature for themselves. For most people, this might indicate that the children had just gotten carried away on their own game of make-believe and that Sam was just a figment of their imagination. But Mr. Y didn't think so. See, he'd already had some strange experiences of his own that made him more inclined to believe in the wiggity nature of reality. Just 3 years prior to the children meeting Sam in the woods, Mr. Y had been driving on an October evening in 1970 when he spotted something strange in the sky. He said it looked like an enormous aircraft, and it was circled by bright lights. He said that as he watched, the craft hovered aimlessly over the swampy River Yar. It had a wide ring of 7 or more lights, each of them a large and clearly defined sphere that Mr. Y described as being like bright red cherries, and it was interspersed with turquoise and white lights. It made no sound as it flew, which seemed unbelievable considering the enormity of its size. As Mr. Y drove on, the object flew parallel to his vehicle, seeming to keep pace with him. After a while, it dropped behind him, flying low over the road. At this point, Mr. Y said that the craft seemed smaller than before, and that the number of bright red cherry lights had reduced to 4. Mr. Y stopped the car to observe the craft. He took a flashlight, torch. He took a torch out of his vehicle. We're in England, baby. Okay, do as the locals do. And he used his torch to signal to the craft. He said he stood there for about 10 minutes trying to signal to the craft, during which time this object was kind of weaving back and forth. Finally, Mr. Y got back in the car and continued on to his destination, which happened to be his friend's house. And he said that when he got there, the craft was still behind him, and his friend came out of the house and also observed this craft. Mr. Y parked his car so that the red taillights were shining at the object, wondering if maybe the red lights would signal to it better than the white light of his torch had. But the craft just continued to hover, almost playing, he said it looked like it was playing hide and seek behind the treetops, until finally, the craft flew away and the lights vanished from view. Afterwards, Mr. Y had several more incidents where he saw singular balls of red light in the sky. Sometimes they would just hang stationary, and sometimes they would follow him as if checking on his movements. 2 years later, in March of 1972, Mr. Y had an even more eerie experience. He said that while out driving along Compton Bay, an unexpected tidal surge blocked the road. Mr. Y exited his vehicle and looked out at the water from the cliffside. He said that he heard a strange droning sound coming from the sea. From his vantage point along the cliff, he saw 2 points of light, like 2 yellow eyes beneath the black waves, staring back up at him like some kind of horrible sea monster. He peered into those yellow eyes as it slowly sank deeper into the darkness of the ocean. and as it faded away, the droning sound went with it. Finally, the tide subsided, and Mr. Y was able to get back into his car and drive home. Mr. Y said that he never told his daughter about these experiences, giving her no reason to make up her own strange encounter with an unknown being. When it came to Faye's experience, Mr. Y apparently believed that his daughter had witnessed something incredible that day. He said, "I get the impression that Faye was somehow taken into a bubble of alien reality, created by this strange personage." Unfortunately, no one else ever claimed to see this strange clown-like entity or his weird metal hut. So the story of All Color Sam seems to end with the conclusion of the Boooooo report. But the thing is, the island where this happened is actually infamous for strange occurrences. Sandown is located on the Isle of Wight, an island with a unique diamond-like shape, which many believe to be the epicenter of the two ley lines that connect most of the important prehistoric sites in southern Britain, including Stonehenge. There are also heavy limestone deposits on the island, a rock that many paranormal investigators associate with high electromagnetic activity. Furthermore, the island is nicknamed Dinosaur Island because it has some of the most rich fossil deposits in all of Europe. Dinosaur fossils and footprints are embedded in the rock that makes up this weird diamond-shaped island, dating back hundreds of millions of years, all the way up to more recent fossilized remains of ancient crocodiles and mammals that are around 30 million years old. There are also artifacts from an early human-like civilization that lived on the island, with tools and artifacts that probably date to a civilization that predates Homo sapiens. So what I'm saying is, this island has some energy, baby. The kind of energy that might allow a strange being to slip between the cracks in two realities, either accidentally or on purpose, and wind up here in our present timeline. Which brings us to the theories stage of this discussion, doesn't it? All right, let's get this out of the way. If you want to Occam's razor this whole story, you got two options, okay? One, it was just some guy in the woods, okay? I hate this one. It's super creepy. I don't like it. Also, very complicated setup to just like be out there hanging out. Maybe it's just like what he does. Maybe he's into it, but then why wasn't it there when Mr. Y went back to investigate? Did he like break down his whole metal hut just because some kids found him? All of it weird, doesn't make sense, okay? Let's dismiss it's just some guy in the woods. I don't want to play that game. And now you can also say that the kids made it all up, all right? And there's no way to disprove that. I mean, some have tried to disprove it by saying like that the details included are just like too wild and that no kid could make it up. But obviously, we gotta call bullshit on that. Like, of course they could have made it up. Kids have the wildest imaginations. Like, those little bitches made up the whole Salem witch trials and people died because of it. You think that kids couldn't come up with a fucked up story like this? There were kids during the Satanic Panic that said that their teachers were flushing them down the toilet so they could go play Dungeons and Dragons with Led Zeppelin in a secret bunker under Disneyland. They could absolutely make up something like All Color Sam, okay? If they can make that up, they can make anything up. Okay, so maybe they made it all up. But does that necessarily mean that it wasn't real? Which brings me to my first theory, okay? Which is that Sam was some kind of thought form entity that was created by a game of make-believe that just went too far. I have another video about thought form entities and tulpas if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of how collective belief can make something manifest. But the short of it is that if psychic energy exists, then it's possible that we might be able to create physical projections of our psychic impressions. And who better to believe in something enough to bring it into reality than children, who lack the dulling influence of years and years of social conditioning that tell them like that none of this is possible. Think about it. How many times as a kid did you get scared by a scary story with a group of other children, and that maybe you might have seen something all together and you all saw the same thing, right? Like maybe everybody saw Bloody Mary in the mirror, or you all put your hands on the planchette of the Ouija board and you saw it move and spell out coherent sentences, or you watched a friend float off the floor during a game of light as a feather, stiff as a board. What you're doing is, in essence, a kind of collective meditation, focusing your psychic energy on the same thought until you manifest it into reality. And I bet that this activity works even better when you're on an island made of limestone and dinosaur bones at the center center of an ancient ley line. So perhaps Sam was imagined by the children. Just for a minute, he was brought into reality by the focus of their belief. But what if Sam wasn't a thoughtform entity? What if his existence had nothing to do with the children at all? So what was he then? Okay, obviously we got the metal hut, right? So it sounds like a spacecraft, and the swamp where Sam was seen is located next to Sandown Airport. So perhaps if someone were flying in from another planet or just wanted a place where they could observe our own flight technology, that swamp would be the place. And we do see Sam interacting with technology that the children couldn't understand. So it seems obvious, I suppose, that Sam might have been of extraterrestrial origin, like he came from outer space. But I'm not so sure about that, because even though Sam's technology was unfamiliar to the children, there's also this weird kind of like analog quality to it. Nothing about him seems streamlined or advanced enough to have come from another star system. He's got wooden slats on his suit and wooden furniture in his hut, and his system of navigation is all cranks and dials. Plus, the guy's fumbling and crying into a microphone in a swamp in England. Do you really think he's capable of interstellar travel? So what if Sam isn't an extraterrestrial, but an ultraterrestrial? Now, if you're new to this particular rabbit hole of weirdness, an ultraterrestrial basically means that it's coming from another dimension instead of outer space, right? It's also known as the interdimensional hypothesis, and it's one closely held by J. Allen Hynek, who pioneered the close encounter classification system and worked as a scientific advisor on several U.S. Air Force UFO research projects, including Project Blue Book. Together with his student Jacques Vallée, Hynek pioneered the idea of interlocking universes. Hynek said there could be another universe with different quantum rules or vibration rates if you want. Our own space-time continuum could be a cross-section through a universe with many more dimensions. We have this idea of space. We always think of another universe being someplace else. It may not. Maybe it's right here. Most recently, we're seeing this hypothesis sneak through with the soft disclosure from the UAP task force hearings, where David Grush testified before Congress, and he corrected one congressperson who asked if extraterrestrial bodies were recovered from some of these crafts. And he specified that what had been recovered from the crafts should be classified as non-human biologics, because he couldn't speculate on where they had come from, okay? Extraterrestrial implies that they had come from outer space. He's saying, we don't know where they came from, they're just not human. Grush also stated, it could be that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial, and that it's actually coming from a higher dimensional physical space that might be co-located right here. Okay, so what I'm saying is that All Color Sam was not necessarily from outer space, but that he might have come from another dimension, and that he slipped through into ours either accidentally or on purpose. Honestly, judging by his clown-like nature, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on accident. He just kind of like slapsticked his way into our reality. He was just like, whoop! And the way he answered the question about whether or not he was a ghost with, well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way, further goes to imply that perhaps that he came from another dimension. Because personally, I also believe that ghosts exist on another dimensional plane as well, but that's a discussion for another video. And it makes sense too that such a thing would happen in a place where there are ley lines and limestone deposits are exceptionally high, because in my experience, a lot of times where one kind of paranormal thing goes on, all kinds of different other paranormal things happen with increased frequency. And this is why you often see triangles of high strangeness, where there's increased cryptid sightings, increased UFO sightings, hauntings, ghosts, all kinds of high strangeness happening all in one area. Whatever's going on there must provide the right environment, either energetically or electromagnetically, for these kinds of interdimensional mix-em-ups to happen with increased frequency. So what do you think? Was All Color Sam a visitor from another dimension? Do you think he was some kind of strange cryptid that came out of hiding for just one day? Do you think that he was a thoughtform entity created by the kids who were just a little too good at make-believe? Or do you think that it was just some guy in the woods, or that it was all made up by Faye and Georgie, and that nothing happened at all? In which case, why are you here? You must have gotten lost on your way to the Sad Beige Skeptic convention, alright baby? Just like Sam got lost in his way between dimensions. Anyway, don't break my heart and say it never happened. I want to believe in All Color Sam, the crying karaoke clown of the Sandown swamp, okay? So give me your theories and tell me if you could share any kind of berry with Sam to see him roll it around in his little space mask. What kind of berry would you share with Sam? Okay, I love you. Bye.